Good morning, everybody. We're going to wait for everybody to log in before we get started.
Hey,
Good morning.
có tụi anh dưới có dạ cày dưới là gì vậy?
Trying to solve that other thing so you don't have to be bothered with it.
What are
The invoice piece.
they? Oh,
I need.
Let me just peek and see what we're looking like here.
Hello, there's a 298 number. Could you identify yourself, please?
I think that's me, Shay Kennard.
You said Shay.
Yes, ma'am, Shay Kennard.
Okay, hello.
Hey, good morning.
So I'm at 7. Do we have to have 7 or 8?
Give me 1 second.
I never remember. I'm sorry, Ruby.
I know Drew Cummings emailed and said he won't make it today.
What about Commissioner Carter?
I have not heard anything. Have you heard anything, Ruby? And I apologize for the jackhammering outside my office.
Oh, there's Lavette.
I don't have anything for an excuse absence. We do need 7.
Well, I think we're at 7. We're at 7.
7, we're good.
So I will officially call the meeting to order. It's 10:37 a.m. Do we have someone who's taking minutes for us for this meeting?
I've been taking minutes, so I'll take them.
Is that Ruby?
Yes.
All right, thanks, Ruby.
Okay.
We do need to find a new secretary at some point for the committee. So if anybody is interested in volunteering, please feel free.
We would love to have you. Okay, so our agenda actually looks very short, but it's really not short. We have a pretty lengthy presentation at the end. I noticed, Colin, we talked on, you and I talked on Friday and we were talking about adding that request. And I didn't see it on the agenda that we have.
Yeah, I apologize. Too many things and trying to rush out of the office to meetings. So I apologize, Madam Chair.
It's okay. So yeah, I don't know if we want to get it out the way. Right after we go through and approve our minutes or not, or if we want to just save it to the end. What are your thoughts, Colin, about where to place it on the agenda? Or should we do it right before Honolulu's?
On trying to, secretary?
No. The appeal that I got from the National Council specifically for the state of North Carolina about
I would say let's do that maybe right after the unsheltered update, before we get into
Gotcha.
Honolulu's presentation.
All right, sounds good. We'll add it to the end. Okay, you guys will hear more about that shortly.
Excuse
So at
me,
this time, I'm sorry.
no, I was gonna ask a question. Well, I was gonna ask, is it okay that I make a statement concerning Mr. Woolley for those who are affiliated with CDI? That I shared with you this morning, at the end of your meeting, if that's possible?
Sure.
Thank you.
Just Angel, remind me that I said that because I'll forget.
All right, no problem.
Okay, so at this time, I will, the minutes were sent out and I will entertain a motion to accept the minutes or for corrections.
I make a motion to accept the minutes.
Second, Ellen.
And I'll second.
Okay, so who made the motion?
Ebony,
Ebony
did.
made,
Mhm.
and it was seconded by
thank you,
Ellen.
Lavette. Oh,
Helen.
Helen.
Okay, I just want to make sure we got it. And there are no additional questions. I will entertain a vote. All those in favor of the approval of the minutes, please put yes in the chat box. If no, you have the same right as well as people abstaining.
Can I get a verbal yes? Because I don't have my chat box open.
Sure. So yeah, give us that. Who is that, Shay?
Yes, ma'am.
Motion carries. The next item on our agenda is our update on our unsheltered count. Are you ready, Hanalea?
Yes, I am. So currently we have 28 literally homeless families and 100 literally homeless singles.
I'm sorry, Hanalea, can you repeat that? I didn't catch it. I'm sorry.
Yes, 28 literally homeless families and 100 literally homeless singles.
So that is
high.
Yeah, that's a
Yes,
big
it
increase
is.
from last month.
It is the highest that I've seen the families numbers be since we started tracking this. So not sure what's going on, but that's what we're seeing.
Oh, wow. Do you know what, like if the significance in that number is anywhere derived from the information we got from legal aid last month's HSAC meeting? Like if people just got evicted because they were waiting on funds, and do you know?
I don't. I could do some digging while The meeting is working to see what caused these families homelessness and how many of them are unsheltered versus maybe being put up in a hotel. Do I still have the numbers from last year? Month. They should be in the minutes.
Right, it was like 78 and 78 singles.
I think it was around 18, if I remember correctly. I can look them up if they're not.
Right, so 10, that's a huge jump in 30 days.
Yeah, and it is, like I said, the highest I've seen it since we've started tracking this, since we had the families committee. So I will do some investigating just to see if I can see more about the situation with the families. Thank you, Sharita. So yeah, so 18 families and 78 singles. My memory is very good. That's good.
Or maybe it's 19, because I see that.
So yeah, so I'll do some investigating and see if there's any additional information you can share about what's going on with the families, if there's anything that we're seeing.
I can answer to the ones that have been sent to me who had children, if you want to know that.
Okay, so I can answer with the referrals that we've received from coordinated entry within the last 30 days. I think we received 5, and some of those families most of them had eviction, and then one recently that we just had last week experienced a fire.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's 5 of them. Thank you for that information. Hanalei, I don't know if you're gonna have time to do any research right now, because you're up. You're up next, and I think you have quite a bit of information to share with us. So if you don't get to it, if we don't get to it, can you just like send us an email out with that that information later on today or something, or this week?
Sorry. Sure, yeah, I can do that. And also, if there's any time after this while you're talking about other items, I can also look into it then.
Okay, sounds great. Was someone else saying something?
Yeah, I was. It's Angel, and it's probably a higher number. Still with the eviction diversion relief program, people that are still waiting. That I was speaking with someone this morning on that, and that number is just outrageously high. People are still waiting. It's a little bit of funds left, but not much, and many families are still waiting. So expect that number to really go up over the next month or 2.
Angela?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell me what they're waiting for? Because we have funds.
Well, Larissa spoke with someone this morning at Legal Aid that was at court, and she said that they was trying to get the information from you all, but someone said that they couldn't get out that information. So that's why I just requested a meeting with you whenever you have a time before Monday, so we could get that number with legal. Everybody could be on the same page, because it's still relatively high number of people that are waiting who had already signed up, who still have not gotten service. And then the numbers of people that are who have been, no eviction court was today, but it's every day this week. So looking at the numbers from last week, I was out of town, so I don't really know. So I'm catching up with Larissa to catch up with you and Legal Aid. So we'll figure it out somehow, somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks. I'm sorry, Hanalei, you could go ahead.
You're good. I just was seeing if there was any more discussion about that, or should we move on? All right. All right, so I will share my, you know what? Sometimes Zoom does this to me. It won't let me share until I go out and come back in. So I'm gonna do that so that I can share my screen. So I will be right back.
Well, while we wait for Hanalei, do you want to share the information you wanted to share, Angel? Oh, never mind. She's back.
Yeah, it just takes a second. I just have to go out and come back in. I don't know why it does that. I get that a lot. All right. So, put my phone. Yeah, so last month, for those who were there may remember, we had a conversation about some of the concerns that the rapid rehousing providers have about the current prioritization for rapid rehousing. So at that time, I had just literally that day gotten back from a 2-week trip and was not prepared to answer questions or present on this. I hadn't had any time to look in the data and really didn't know we were going to be having that conversation. So since that time, I've been able to go back, look in the data, do a lot of analysis, and be able to come back with some suggestions, some information and responses for y'all about what we're seeing and what we might be able to do to continue on the path we're on while also addressing some of the concerns. So let's start with a reminder about what the current prioritization for rapid rehousing looks like. So the priority 1 group is those who have already been approved for a unit and who only need move-in costs. And the idea behind this, again, was specifically to help us move forward with clients who really just need one-time assistance quickly, and also to encourage the shelter and the street outreach providers to really be working on housing plans with their clients and not be waiting on the rapid rehousing providers to do that work with them. Our priority 2 group are people that are chronically homeless. Those, and this is, I should say, this is any of these groups, it's not all, so they can be in any of these 4 groups. They're chronically homeless, they've been approved for a voucher, they have 3 or more shelter entries, or they're actively fleeing intimate partner violence. So the rationale for each of these groups was specific. So for chronically homeless, we are really trying to prioritize people who are chronically homeless for housing. We are trying to end chronic homelessness in Durham. That is the goal. For those approved for a voucher, the idea was that once they have a voucher, they have an easy path to housing, and we should be supporting them in that process. 3 or more shelter entries, that was based on an analysis of significant predictors of clients staying on the by name list for 90 days or more. So with the goal of trying to focus our housing efforts on those who would not self-resolve on their own, this was the predictor that we found. And then actively fleeing intimate partner violence, the idea was to prioritize those who had an imminent safety risk for housing. Priority 3 was those who had been on the by name list for 90 days or more. So again, with this 3 or more shelter entries and the chronic, we were trying to prioritize those who had been or would be long-term homeless without intervention. But for those we didn't catch in that initial screening, the idea was that we would catch those who were on the by name list for 90 days or more in this next priority group. And then finally, priority 4 is everyone else. So I just want to pause to see if everyone feels like they understand the status quo, the current prioritization, if they have any questions just about how it works, what the policy is now. Not any thing about the way it should be, but just anything about the way, if everyone feels like they're understanding it. All right. So just to go in a bit more detail about how we got this 3 or more shelter entries, I did an analysis, again, of significant predictors of those who would stay on the by name list for 90 days or more. I analyzed a bunch of different factors and found only one was predictive, which was clients who had 3 or more shelter stays were 5 times more likely to stay on the by name list for 90 days or more. So the idea being this was predictive of clients who would not self-resolve and therefore would be people that we would want to use our scarce rapid rehousing resources on.
But Hanley, I got a question. So what if, were you able to tell if those people had been placed before and lost housing?
So there's a variety, right? This doesn't really select between that, and actually I'll talk about it, but in this new analysis, I did look at prior housing attempts to see if it was predictive, and it was not. We continue to see that the attempt, if you've been rapidly rehoused before, if you've been housed, that is not predictive of how long you're going to stay on the by name list. So there's a variety of clients in this group.
Okay.
But as you know, Sharita, many clients have been through shelter many times before and have never been housed. So I would not say the majority of these are people that have been housed before. Many of our clients, we've seen clients in shelter 15, 20, even 30 times, and they've never been housed in the years they've gone through shelter. So it's definitely not to say that I would say it's probably a minority of clients who've been housed before, but there are some. But I would say more of those are in the chronic group than in this group. All right, so again, just to restate the goals of this prioritization was to reduce chronic homelessness with the eventual goal, along with our PSH strategy of ending chronic homelessness, to reduce the number of clients who stay on the by name list for 90 days or more, and to support self-resolved exits to permanent housing. So we really cannot help everyone. So the idea being that anyone who can self-resolve should be self-resolving, and we want to encourage the emergency shelter and street outreach providers to be supporting that process with their clients. All right, so what have been the results of this attempt and in terms of these goals? So we have been effective at reducing chronic homelessness with this strategy, and not this strategy alone, but this strategy alongside our EHV strategy and alongside our PSH move on strategy, which has been another big factor. We've seen a 28% reduction in chronic homelessness. So we have the lowest, currently we have the lowest number of chronically homeless clients that I've seen since I've been tracking. So that's very exciting, that's very positive, and we want to continue working on that goal of ending chronic homelessness. We've seen a 15% reduction in non-chronic clients who stay on the by name list for 90 days or more. So not quite as big as we might have hoped, and not quite as big as the chronic reduction, but we've seen a small reduction in non-chronic clients staying on the by name list for 90 days or more. We've also seen a 25% increase in clients exiting to permanent housing without the assistance of rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, or a voucher. So we are seeing that increase we hope for in self-resolving, right? So we are seeing more active engagement earlier in the process with the shelter providers, with the street outreach providers in that housing process, and not just waiting for rapid rehousing, because they know my client's lower on the priority. We really need to be proactive in self-resolving. So we are seeing that increase we hoped for. But there have been challenges, and some of these challenges were reflected in the conversation last month, and some of the challenges I want to highlight today. So we had really hoped that, you know, we would be so effective at reducing chronic homelessness, we would get through this chronic homeless group, and we would be able to prioritize. And it says priority 2. I think of it as priority 2 because that priority 1 is that clients who've already been approved, but really it's priority 3. So it's those clients who've been on the by name list for 90 days or more. We really hope that we were able to prioritize more of them. And what we found is that it's actually been rare that we've gotten to that group, because we have so many people who are chronically homeless or have a bunch of shelter entries or are actively fleeing or have a voucher, that we haven't been able to move on as often as we'd hoped. We have it occasionally, we get a priority 2 client in or a priority 3 client. But it's not as often as we'd hoped. And that is reflected in that small reduction that we're seeing in the clients on the by name list for 90 days or more, right? Because we're not getting to them as often. And as was reflected in the conversation last month, the rapid rehousing providers are struggling with a lack of diversity in the housing challenges experienced by the rapid rehousing clients they're receiving. So, you know, they're receiving a lot of clients with a lot of challenges, and that lack of diversity is making that housing search process challenging. Additionally, something we didn't necessarily anticipate was the level of challenge that we're having in finding housing for clients with vouchers. We've had a lot of landlords pull out of the voucher participation in the last 6 months, with a real acceleration in the last 3. And it went from, we want to prioritize clients with vouchers because that's an easy process to housing, to now actually the rapid rehousing providers don't want to take the voucher clients. They're saying to me, I can't take voucher clients because I can't house them. And so that's been a shift. That's been really, really hard. We are housing some of the clients with the vouchers, but it's just taking a lot longer, and it's been a lot more of a struggle than we initially thought. Sorry, are you saying something?
I was just gonna say, one of the things that I've experienced or encountered with working with some of my clients who are, let's say they were Streets to Homes program folks, where Housing for New Hope was paying the bulk of, you know, paying the subsidy and things like that, wasn't coming from DHA. But then as they were like maybe trying to transition that person to a voucher, the landlord was willing to house the tenant as long as Housing for New Hope was paying the subsidy. But as soon as it was like, oh, we're going to switch this person to a voucher, the clients had to find somewhere else to go.
Yeah, it's been really across the board. I mean, like I said, we've housed about a quarter of the clients who've been issued EHV. So it's not no one, but it's just been really, really hard and it's taken a long time. And then finally, this is something I wanted to highlight that I had sort of just begun to be aware of when we had our conversations last month. And I, again, was not prepared with data for y'all, but we are seeing a slight reduction in access for families compared to their proportion on the by name list that I want to address. So 14% of rapid rehousing slots in the last year have gone to families, but they comprise 20% of the by name list. So for those who remember way back when, there was a time when almost all rapid rehousing slots were going to families, and part of this process over the last year and change has been readjusting to give more access to singles. So I think what's happened is we've swung a little bit too far in that process. It's great that singles are getting more access, but we also want to make sure that families are getting access proportional to their representation in the system. So we want to swing back a bit to make sure that there's more access for families and they're not just proportionately losing out access. So the recommendations I'm making are to address this diversity issue, but also to address the family issue as well. So
I have a question. When you were doing this evaluation, were you looking at transition age youth with or without children and how well we are doing with meeting that need as well, or you were just looking at singles and families in general?
I just looked at singles and families in general. Something to think about, and you'll see this as I talk about this analysis, is that you need a certain volume to be able to do the statistical analysis. And we just don't have a large enough volume of transition age youth.
But the reason,
the kind of statistical analysis, now we could do a qualitative analysis for sure. And that's not something I did. But one thing I did do was I did look at age, younger clients as a predictor of self-resolving, and it was not significant. I did look at not just transition age youth, but those in the 18 to I think 35 range, which is predictive of some other things. So I thought it might be predictive of staying on the by name list longer, but it was not. So that was the only sort of thing I looked at in terms of age. But no, I did not pull out transition age youth as a special category, other than just looking at if that group was more likely to stay on the by name list longer than others, which they are not.
I'm sorry for asking these questions. They're just popping up in my mind just from conversations I've had with other people, because I think sometimes we forget about the transition age youth in our conversations. So, sometimes when you don't look at it, that impact the ability to report out, or to make sure that we're creating space to meet those needs. And I know that we have people like on our committee who, work with transition age youth, and sometimes the things that we talk about just don't reflect their population. So I'm always happy to go back and do more analysis. That wasn't something that was on my mind when I was doing this. And again, I am limited by what I can do, but what I can do is I can go back and I can just look at their proportional similar to families, right? Like, are they getting proportional access? Right.
Compared to their proportion of the population? That's something I can definitely do, but I'll have to report back on that because that wasn't something I specifically looked at, but I think it's a great suggestion and I can definitely do that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, and you don't need to apologize for asking questions, Sharita, or anyone else who has questions. I appreciate them, and there are things that I might not have thought of that we want to look into, so that's always very useful. All right, so as I worked on these recommendations, I had two goals in mind. One was to increase access for families to match their representation in the system, as I stated. And the other one was to increase the diversity of rapid rehousing clients. And we're using diversity here, not in terms of racial equity, but diversity in terms of the types of clients, the types of challenges they're experiencing, their housing history, that kind of thing. While continuing to prioritize those resources for those who will not self-resolve. So we're doing a better job. We're doing a good job. We're on a good track in terms of not using our scarce resources for people who would self-resolve, because more people are self-resolving. And we have fewer people staying on the by name list for 90 days or more. So we want to continue on that track. We don't want to backtrack on that, but also think about bringing more diversity in for those who would otherwise not self-resolve. All right, so before we go into recommendations, I just want to explain what I did. So I redid the analysis that I had done 10 months ago of significant predictors of staying on the by name list for 90 days or more. This time around, I split it out for families and singles separately because I had enough data to do that. So for those who may not be, statistics, minded or have a lot of experience with that, the more data you have, the more you can analyze and the more likely you are to find meaningful answers in the data. So previously, because we had less data, because we'd only been doing this by name list for like a year, I couldn't separate out on families and singles because there weren't enough families to analyze on their own. Now we have enough data that I was able to do that. And we also have enough data that I was able to redo the analysis and find more information, more about what predicts people staying on the by name list for a long time, just from a factor that we have more information than we used to. So I redid this analysis. I looked, like I said, at age, I looked at disabilities, I looked at income, I looked at a bunch of different things. I redid some shelter analysis stuff. And I was able to find some additional factors that are predictive that I want to share with y'all. So the first thing that I did was I had this hunch that for families, it might actually be that 2 or more shelter stays instead of 3 or more shelter days were predictive of staying on the by name list for 90 days or more. And I kind of had that hunch because I know the pattern of families. Families have fewer repeat entries because they tend to have these long continued stays because they're not in congregate shelter, which is really the feeder of those repeat stays. So I thought it's rare that families stay 2 or more times. So I bet that that's predictive in the same way that 3 or more times is predictive for singles. And indeed found a massive effect. I cannot highlight this enough. You do not see effects of this size. Families who stay 2 or more times in shelter are 20 times more likely to stay on the by name list for 90 days or more. That is a huge effect size.
Makes sense.
Families who have previously stayed in shelter 2 or more times are 20 times more likely to stay on the by name list for 90 days or more. So as opposed to right now, what we're doing, which is prioritizing anyone who has 3 or more shelter stays, this implies for families, we really should be reducing that criteria to 2 or more shelter stays. And this would give that goal of more access for families, right? The next thing is not specific to singles or families, it's just across the board. Clients with a housing barrier score over 5 are 12 times more likely to stay on the by name list for 90 days or more. That's still a very big effect size. If you remember that 3 or more shelter stays, that was 5 times more likely, which is still pretty big. So this is 12 times more likely for those who have a housing barrier score over 5. So this is 2 things. One, this is good news because it means our housing barrier assessment, which was intended to predict likelihood to self-resolve, is actually doing that. So that's good news. This validates what we're doing in terms of our housing barrier assessment, which was in fact indeed intended to assess how likely the client was to self-resolve. And it's a really meaningful and significant predictor when their housing barrier score is over 5. And then finally, clients with 2 or more disabilities, and I should specify, all of this is for non-chronic clients. Non-chronic clients were completely pulled out of the analysis because they're already being prioritized. So any client in this analysis is a non-chronic client who doesn't otherwise have a housing plan. So clients with 2 or more disabilities are 4 times more likely to stay on the by name list for 90 days or more. So not quite as huge of an effect size, but still really meaningful. So I'm going to kind of explain how I operationalize these into some recommendations. But before we go into this, I just want to make sure everyone understands these effect sizes and these predictors and what we're analyzing here and what we found.
I understand. I'm just curious, if you looked at it, did you break it down by race to see if there was anything significant?
I did not.
Okay.
But I did, you'll see in a second, Sharita, I did look at the demographics of these groups to make sure that if we added them, it would be equitable, but I didn't look at predictors separate by race.
And just the programs that they enroll into, is there a way?
Is someone speaking to us or are they just having a separate conversation? Because if you are speaking to us, it's really hard to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, just very quiet, but I think I can get it.
Can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So basically, I wanted to know the programs that people enroll into, do we have something set up that can help them with their career and stabilizing or securing a job to kind of help with their finances?
Yeah, so there are a few different programs in the community that do that work. Urban Ministries has a workforce development office that helps people with that. There's also an organization that called Step Up that we refer to a lot that does like a structured program, and then at the end of that they help with housing, job search. So we do have several programs in the community that support employment search and employment training.
Hanalea, there's a question in the chat about what's the score range under the new system?
Are they talking about the housing barrier score range?
Yes.
Yes, I anticipated that question. So at the end of the presentation, I'll just jump ahead to pull that up. I wanted to remind folks of what was actually on the housing barrier assessment and what everything was worth. Now, the thing to note is the housing barrier assessment is weighted by half. So all of these scores, think about it, if you were trying to get a client to 5, each of these should be worth half. I'm not going to explain why it's too complex, but it's a weighted assessment. So essentially, client has zero income in the weighting would be 1.5, registered sex offender would be 2.5. So you can kind of look and see what it would take for a client to get to 5 if you add everything up and then divide that by 2. So the score range after weighting goes up to 24 is the answer to that question. The actual assessment here is actually worth about 40 something points, but once we have it, it's worth 24 points.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Let me go back to the slide. All right. So I wanted, and this was sort of anticipated with Sharita's question, I wanted to look at the demographics of these groups because we want to make sure, we really have an eye on racial equity, also in family single equity here. And I wanted to make sure that any group that we were proposing adding to the priority 1 group was representative of the by name list overall, right? We don't want to be exacerbating any equity, and with families, we're actually trying to address an equity issue. So here on the left here, you see the demographics of the entire by name list. So 74% of clients on the by name list are Black or African American, while 22% are white. 20% of those on the by name list are families, while 80% are singles. I did not analyze demographics over all of income. Income is really manually in a way I have to do it, and that was just more informational rather than representation. I wanted the rapid rehousing providers to see kind of like what would this group be looking like in terms of like what percent would have income versus zero income. So I didn't do that for the entire by name list, but everything else is there. And the entire by name list is 251 clients as of when I did this analysis last week. All right, so for the group that has a housing barrier assessment over 5, this is pretty representative racially. So 77% of clients are Black and African American. That's very close to the 74% that they match on the by name list. And then 27% of that group is families. So that's more, and that's actually a good thing because again, we're trying to increase the proportion of families to match their proportion of the system, since the current group is decreased access for families. And then 32%, so about a third of this group has income. So this group is not as much of an income group, which makes sense because having zero income is one of the ways that you can get a higher housing barrier assessment. So it makes sense that this would be a less income group. And this is 9% of the by name list overall, 52 people. All right, and then we look at the demographics of the 2 or more disabilities group. So 80% of this group is Black or African American, again, very representative with the by name list overall. 12% are families, so that's a decrease. So we want to be very aware of that as we're trying to increase access for families, that this group has a decrease in families. And then 68% of families. So while this group has some issues with representation for families, it has a lot of people with income, which is a good thing, right? 68%, that's the vast majority, are bringing on some income. A lot of them, of course, probably have disability income, right? Because they've got 2 or more disabilities. And then finally, what are the demographics of the group if we were to combine all 3 of these predictors and add them on? So the group of people that have a housing barrier assessment over 5, have 2 or more disabilities, or are families with 2 or more shelter stays, what would the demographics of that group be? And we find it's actually pretty representative and looks pretty good in terms of income. So 76% compared to 74% are Black or African American. That's very close to our representation on the by name list. 20% are families. That's exactly the same as the by name list overall. And 66% have income. So still the vast majority. And this ends up being about a quarter of the by name list overall, 24% or 59 people. So just any questions about demographics, representation, anything like that? All right, moving on. So then I developed some potential recommendations. I developed 2 different sets of recommendations that we could review for changes to the prioritization. Of course, y'all could recommend an alternative, but these are mine. So this is the first potential proposal that we could do. Again, keeping the priority 1 group the same, those who've already been approved, not making any changes to that. Priority 2, we'd keep chronic. We'd keep 3 or more shelter entries for singles. We'd add 2 or more shelter entries for families. And then we add those with a housing barrier assessment over 5. We'd remove the voucher group. So no longer having a special priority for vouchers, they just fall wherever they land in the prioritization. We'd remove the IPV group. I'm recommending this because we have special programs that are serving those with intimate partner violence. So I don't think we need a special prioritization for them. And I'd also say that what we're seeing is actually by the time that people fleeing intimate partner violence are getting onto the by name list, they're already in a safe location. So they're not in immediate crisis, which I think was the thought when we did that initial prioritization.
Ebony has a question, Hanalea.
Sure, go ahead, Ebony.
Hey, Hanalea, I'm not sure if this is a part of the presentation, but I wanted to know for families who have been accepted into Families Moving Forward through the coordinated entry process, but then has been removed for not following the directions of the home, how do they fall underneath this priority group, or do they go back on the list in another priority?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ebony. So as long as they're in touch with us in some way, we will continue serving. And we definitely have clients, they get prioritized for shelter, they get exited from shelter for rule violation. We will still hold that prioritization for them. It's a little harder with families who haven't been prioritized just because sometimes they lose touch with us. Right. But if we've got a street outreach provider or they're in touch with Entry Point, we will continue pushing towards that prioritization for them. So absolutely being in shelter or not in shelter, as long as they're still literally homeless, not if they go to family or friend's house, that's a different thing. But as long as they're still literally homeless, we will continue to keep them on the by name list.
So for clarity, when it happens, because we just had this happen last week, when a family has been removed from Families Moving Forward, they reach back out to coordinated entry, correct? And then they're placed on wherever priority if they're not staying with someone else. Okay, perfect. Just wanted to know that process. Thank you.
Absolutely. That's a great question. And so I think that's something we've done really well. Is I think that previously we have really struggled to serve unsheltered families and singles on the by name list because we were doing it based on HMIS. Now that we're out of HMIS, we have a lot more of ability to keep people on and hold on to them even when they have a gap in a service. Because a lot of times what happens is a client gets exited from shelter and then they have a gap in time where we don't hear from them and then maybe they reappear, right? So what we're doing a really good job in now is like keeping an eye on that person or that family and saying, hey, we're going to hold on to this. We're going to think about them. Has anyone in the community seen them? Now we're actually had some households where we've been able to have the previous shelter provider track them down, give them information about street outreach and get them reconnected. So I think that's something we've really improved on in terms of just making sure that people don't lose their access to the system just because they were exited from shelter. Yeah, and Sharita, were you saying something?
Yeah, so if somebody got put out, if a family got put out, it's kind of like 2 questions. Is the expectation in order for them to remain eligible for them to like stay outside? And then number 2 is for some reason, something about 7 days in my brain is here. Like even if a person went to stay with someone, it's not considered like a permanent non-homeless situation until you've been there 7 days or more. So is there any intensive outreach to families once they get this, put out in those 7 days? Because we understand that 7-day mark is what transitions them to no longer be considered homeless.
Yeah, so a couple of things about that. One is they don't have to be sleeping outside, right? Like if they're put up in a hotel by, let's say, Ebony's program or someone, that's still considered literally homeless, right? As long as they're not paying for their own hotel room. They could be staying in their car. They could be in a different shelter, as long as they're just literally homeless, right? In terms of the gap, that's right. So if someone exits to family or friends, we keep them on, and they're non-chronic. Chronic is its own thing. They stay on the binding list for a long time as we look for them. But if they're non-chronic, and they exit to family and friends, we keep them on the by name list for 7 days before we exit them to see if they make contact again with someone in the system. We don't do targeted outreach, which is what you're talking about. We do try to get the shelters, and this is something we're really trying to encourage the shelters to do, if they know they're going to exit a client, and particularly if they know that client's going to be unsheltered, to connect them to street outreach before the exit. So they have that connection initially. And that's something that's been a challenge and we're continuing to work on. And I think we are starting to see improvements on, but it's something we continue to work towards. It's a little different if they're going to stay with someone. So we're looking, if someone's going to stay with someone, we're looking for them to reach back out to Entry Point and let them know, hey, I'm at risk of becoming unsheltered. I need that service. And we know they know how because they've already got access previously in shelter. In terms of someone who is not chronic and they exit to unsheltered homelessness, or we don't know where they go, we actually do 14 days. So we keep them on the by name list for 14 days while we see if they make contact again or if we can find them or something. And again, that's much longer for chronic households, but for non-chronic. All right. So then in this version, I'm suggesting adding actively fleeing intimate partner violence to the priority 3 group, since I've just suggested removing it from the priority 2 group. So I'm suggesting moving it down a priority, essentially for the reasons that I cited. And then again, priority 4 would retain everyone else.
Hanalea, earlier in the presentation, you talked about how you were rarely able to access the priority 2 group. So how does this, if that remains the same, how does making these changes to priority 2 group benefit the people in priority 2?
Thank you, Sharita. Yes, I forgot to highlight that. So thank you. I looked at, and I've heard some proposals, what if we did like a quarter of referrals from priority 3 or something like that? I looked at that as an option and it's just not really practical, because how do I keep track of a quarter when we have a bunch of different providers and one's got one day and one's got one? It's not practical for me to try to aim for a certain proportion. So what turned out to be the best option was to expand the priority 2 group, so that basically the goal is we're catching more people who are predicted of staying on the by name list for 90 days or more. And so fewer people will go into that priority 3 group. Fewer people will be in that group overall, because more of them will be caught in the priority 2 group. So we're expanding the priority 2 group. We're making it more predictive of this staying on the by name list of 90 days or more, again, with the goal of really reaching that population, being our other goal in addition to those who are chronic. And so having just fewer people, essentially what this priority 3 is, it's a catch-all, right? It's for those we did not catch with our predictive factors who end up in priority 3. So we're trying to catch more with these predictive factors initially so that they don't go into that priority 3. All right, so I think the advantages of this version compared to the next version is that it's a smaller group. Compared to expanding it to also include the disabilities group. So in terms of like, again, retaining some access for the lower down priorities and just making sure that like you don't expand your priority group so much that it's like everyone on the by name list. I think that's an advantage here. We know that the housing barrier assessment group is a lot of families, so we're really increasing the proportionalness of families, which is a good thing. Some disadvantages, again, is that housing barrier assessment group is less likely to have income. So we are expanding sort of more no income clients, and we're excluding, another predictive factor. So those are just things to think about. The other version of the recommendation, it removes all the same things from the priority 2, but essentially the big change here is that it also adds those with 2 or more disabilities to the priority 2 group. So the advantage here is it's adding another predictive factor. We've got more clients with income here, so that could be a good thing. The downside is now the group is even bigger. This is the least of the predictive factors. And, so we're less likely to get down to that priority 3 because we've made even a bigger group. So those are my 2 alternative recommendations. Yep, that's the end of the presentation. So I would love to just hear thoughts, questions, see what y'all's thoughts are. Yeah.
Any questions? I was trying to give somebody else opportunity to ask questions because, of course, I have questions.
Go ahead, Sharita.
So in this second proposal, where you added the 2 or more disabilities, that would still be covered under chronic, though, right?
So this is specifically non-chronic clients who have 2 or more disabilities, right? So these are clients without the length of time homeless.
But you have chronic in priority too. That's
right. So let me see how I can say this. So they can be chronic, which means they have at least 1 disability and they have 12 months or more homeless.
Right.
Or doesn't matter about their history of homelessness if they have 2 or more disabilities, right? So they're 2 different things.
Oh, got you. Okay, that's where that falls in. Okay. Any questions? This is an item, if I'm not mistaken, Hamalia, that you're asking us to advise you on as far as revamping. So using, adopting proposal 1 based on the information you shared with us today, or proposal 2, or staying where we are, or, that's what you need from us today, right?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay.
And I think I see that Helen Tripp has a question.
Go ahead, Helen.
I'm gonna step in and ask a question, Sharita, so you don't have to ask all of them. Do you have a sense of the numbers that you may be able to reach by making these changes for either proposal?
It's a good question. So while we're just chatting here, let me actually pull the number that we prioritized for our rapid rehousing last year so y'all can kind of see what that is. We do not reach all of the clients in that priority 2 group, right? Some of them don't get their documents together, some create other plans, some it just doesn't seem like a good option, and we have scarce resources. So this is not going to mean that everyone in that priority group is going to get access, and we already have the fact that not everyone in the group is getting access. But it will mean that the group that does get access will be a bit more diverse. And hopefully what the rapid rehousing providers have told us is if the group is more diverse, then they'll be able to serve more people because it won't take us long to help them find housing. So that's the hope. But we have to see if that pans out. I'm just pulling up the data here. So last year we served how many people in rapid rehousing? Or not served, but placed. Last year we placed 110 clients in rapid rehousing. So that gives you kind of a sense of the size of the group that at least right now is being served compared to the size of this group. Hopefully that's helpful. Yeah, I think Colleen has a question.
Go ahead, Colleen.
Yeah, I was just unmuting. Could you repeat again the benefit of removing the IPV group to priority 3 for me?
Yeah. So the initial, again, I think my thought is we can't have everyone be in this priority 2 group, right? And we can't just keep expanding it because to the point of Sharita and Helen, if we just keep making bigger, then we don't really have a priority group, right? Then we just have a big list. So as I was thinking about, well, how do we make this group more targeted for the 2 groups we're really trying to focus on, which is chronic or those who would not otherwise self-resolve. I looked at IPV and I thought, well, we already have programs that are funded specifically to focus on that population. So we have other reasons that population will get served regardless of the priority. And then in addition, the original thought, the rationale was, okay, well, these clients have an imminent safety risk, but we're not really seeing that. Most of the clients on the by name list are clients who are already in a safe location. Most of them are in shelter and are safe. So there isn't sort of this urgency of a safety risk that was kind of conceptualized when that was created. So between the specifically population focused programs that we have and the fact that these clients, I think once they're in shelter, are a lot more similar to all the other clients, I think it makes sense to move them down in the priority.
Thank you.
Honolulu, I have a question too. When Miss Cox, is Miss Colleen finished? Okay.
Yes, I am.
Okay. So the difference, the proposal 1 and proposal 2, I know you added the disabilities in the proposal 2. I guess I'm just wondering, because you say that will make the group a lot bigger, which you already said it was kind of difficult serving everybody in priority 2. What's is that, what impact is that having on the diversity? I guess when you added the 2 disabilities, is that making this group a lot more diverse, or?
Yeah, so it doesn't add a whole lot more clients. As you can see here, it essentially adds 7 additional clients to the by name list right now. So it adds a few more, not huge. So I don't think there's like any harm in doing it. Just adds a few more. I think in terms of the diversity and the demographics here, I think it does reduce the family proportion a bit, but again, it's only 7 clients, so you're not talking about a huge proportion. It does increase those with income a bit. Again, it's a small group, because many of those with 2 or more disabilities also have a housing barrier assessment over 5 and get caught there, right? So there's a lot of overlap in these 2 groups. So it's just the 7 is like the small group. Of course, it might not be 7 tomorrow, but it's a small proportion of the by name list overall. So I would say either of these would be fine. I'm just trying to highlight the relative advantages and disadvantages, but I think at the end of the day, either of these options is really a fine option. Yeah, Russ.
So I appreciate your work on this. This is really, really helpful. And one of the pieces we've continued to raise is just very much the practical need to be able to work with new landlords and not send highly vulnerable people to folks or into community situations where we're not sure yet of whether that's a safe place. Kind of thinking on the harm reduction side. So I'm just curious your thoughts between, and let me say, part of that is to get new people online, test them out as landlords, and then maybe try them out on a more intensive person. And after you take out the very clear issues, we can come back to another day, around kind of DHA related pieces that's causing so many landlords to exit right now with HCVs. The other piece is that a lot of the clients we're sending are so highly vulnerable, high needs, almost need 24/7 supportive service access. So that being said, between these 2, which one do you feel like will give us that kind of broad mix that we need in order to bring new landlords on? Again, it's not that we're trying to serve people with less needs just because we want to. It's that if we're going to solve this landlord situation, we're going to have to diversify in that sense. Right. So just curious after, this is really good work. I really appreciate it. But of the 2, which one do you think gets us closer to having a pool of folks that we can use as, I hate to say guinea pigs on new landlords, but yeah, and bring new kinds of landlords on?
I think it's kind of hard to say because there's advantages and disadvantages, right? I think if you bring in both, you have the advantage that you have more people with income, right? Which I know is something there. It's often going to be disability income, but I know that for some lands, it's just some income that they want to see, right? If you don't bring in both, then you have a slightly smaller group, which means maybe you get a few more of those priority 3 clients. But again, we're really trying to make that priority 3 group really tiny because we're trying to predict everyone on the front end. So, if I had to choose, I would probably say including those with disabilities, we got a bit more income in there, but it does mean that we have a slightly larger group, which means, but I think, it's good. I think it will create more of a balance because maybe you've got a client with 2 or more disabilities. Those 7 clients, those are clients with pretty few housing barriers nominally, right? Because they're not getting that housing barrier assessment score. So I think probably, they've got 2 or more disabilities. They need that push to the front end of the line. Maybe they need some help with support with income, but they're not necessarily presenting with a lot of those kind of in your face housing barriers that might scare off a new landlord, whereas the housing barrier assessment clients, maybe those are clients who actually don't need as much support, but it's just that over the hump kind of client that it's like in your face, it's something. So I think it does create a bit more diversity to have both. And in the interest of creating sort of this like pool of clients that have like a lot of different things and that we can kind of match the clients, I think this does that a bit more probably if I had to choose, although I will be honest and say it's really hard to say, but I think that's probably where I'm leaning.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
And sorry, Colin, I know you want to chime in, but just you saying something reminded me of a conversation you and I had that I wanted to highlight. The other thing, Russ, that I think we really want to highlight is when we have a landlord and we can't match them to an active rapid rehousing client, right? We do have a lot of these clients who can pay their way, right? And we're in this sort of self-resolve group, and we really want to be encouraging that self-resolve. So we would like to see still offering that landlord up and saying, you know, look, we've got a landlord, we're not gonna be able to match them any of these clients who need ongoing assistance. Does anyone have a client that's kind of like a low barrier, easy win client, and sharing that resource because we can still get them in, you know, and then we get them approved, we can still do those move-in costs, but some of that kind of strategic thinking beyond just this sort of, because these clients have that commitment of that long-term assistance. So that's something else I think we can try in addition to really support that. You know, we've got this new landlord. Okay, we're not gonna be able to do any of these clients with this landlord. So let's put it out to the by name list and say like, hey, do we have anyone who like has their own income? Because we do have some of those clients, right? And those are clients we want to be self-resolving. So I think that's something else we can be thinking about as well.
Colin, do you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, to sort of Russ's point and Hanalea's point on that priority one group, where we have that group who already have approval for a unit and just need first month rent and security deposit. Maybe there's a way to expand that group to sort of what Hanalea was just saying, of people who have not just who need the money, but may have money, but need some housing navigation or having some help with that, expanding that priority group. So not just people who need the financial assistance, but maybe they've got the money and need some help getting matched to a landlord, adding that to that priority group, which may give a wider variety, and then coupling that with, if I'm a rapid rehousing provider, being able to say, oh, I'm gonna rapidly rehouse 10 people this month, and sort of, right, here are the 10, and then you might have 5 priority 1 and 5 priority 2, and then you just work your way through that 10 over the course of the month, which sort of gives you a wider variety of folks that you're able to sort of try and fit, because you're trying to match landlord to tenant and making sure it's a good fit for all parties involved. Just a thought.
So that is an option. It's not one I would recommend. The reason being that, again, I think we're on the right track in terms of focusing on clients who would not otherwise self-resolve. This is what this is doing. This is looking at those predictors, right? Maybe these clients do have income. Maybe they just need that housing search. And I think, in fact, some of these clients look like that. But we want to use meaningful predictors of that, right? So I would not encourage us to be prioritizing clients who just sort of are an easy win at the top, who need that housing search assistance, because those are clients the data is showing us, if they don't fall into one of these predictor groups that we're putting in the priority 2, are likely to self-resolve. And those are clients we really want to be encouraging the shelter providers and the street outreach providers to be engaging in that housing search process. And I think we're on the right track with them engaging more in that process and helping them. And then again, I think an added bonus would just be more sharing of those resources when the rapid rehousing providers don't have a client who can be matched to a unit, sharing that more broadly or trying to find that client. But I wouldn't encourage us to add more when it's not really predictive, because essentially we're taking client resources away from clients who would not otherwise self-resolve and putting them towards clients who would, which means that overall there are going to be fewer resources for those clients who would otherwise stay on the by name list for a long time.
Thank you, Hanalea. Thank you guys for this robust conversation about the information that's presented. This is an item that Hanalea needs some guidance on. I don't know if everybody feels like their questions have been answered enough for us to make a decision at this time, but I think we need to make a decision. No crickets.
So are we just making a decision, I guess, between proposal 2 and, proposal 1 and proposal 2?
So you could choose proposal one, you could choose proposal 2, you could choose to make no change, or someone could propose something I haven't recommended, right? You know, if there's someone else who feels strongly that there's a better option. These are just my proposals.
Can you put proposal 1 up again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, the key difference, just as a reminder for the group, between proposal 1 and proposal 2 is that the proposal 1 group only adds the housing barrier assessment 5 or more group, and proposal 2 adds the housing barrier assessment 5 or more, or over 5 group, and it also adds the group that have 2 or more disabilities.
Thinking hard here.
Yeah, I think I'm more so going towards proposal 2.
I was too saying that, Lavette.
I agree.
And Honolulu, if I'm not mistaken, you could try this out for a certain amount of time. You could come back and report to us, and we can make changes again. Right?
That's right, Sharita. All of this is doing is adding this into our existing pilot. So we're already in a pilot phase. We're adjusting our pilot, but that's right. All of this is being piloted. So we're in an iterative phase of change. We've been in that since September of last year, and we'll continue on that path. Absolutely. And I think, Helen, you might have a question.
Yeah, you were almost answering my question, I think, about pilot. How much time would you need to pilot this change to see if it's going to be effective?
I think, well, it depends on what we define as effectiveness. I think if we want to look at a reduction in that 90 days or more group, you know, anywhere from 6 months to a year might be required. I think if we just kind of want to like get a qualitative assessment, how this is feeling for the providers and that kind of thing, I think that when we come back in the fall with the racial equity information, we can also come back with just kind of a qualitative discussion about how it's going.
Thank you.
Angel?
Okay, so it's sort of kind of like a tester to see how it goes. If it works, we proceed. If it doesn't, we go back to the drawing board, sort of kind of speak.
Exactly. We're in a working phase. We're iterating, we're changing, we're trying things out. So this is just making some adjustments based on some feedback we've provided and some things we've seen in the data. And we're going to continue on that sort of trial process, just with some changes being made. Absolutely.
Yeah, I like number 2. I like what this is. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, Angel, is that a motion?
Yes, it's a motion to adapt that, the language, whatever. I'm multitasking here. Yeah, it's a motion to adopt that one right there.
Adopt priority 2.
Adopt priority number 2. Thank you, dear, very much.
Okay, I have.
Can I second that motion?
Who was that?
That's Shay.
Hey,
All
Shay.
right.
All right.
Hey.
Okay, so all those in favor, yes in the chat box. If you're not, you have the right to say no. You can abstain if you feel that you need to do so. Hanalea, can we the motion did not include a timeline for review. Can we do a 6-month review?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think we can, even before 6 months, just have that kind of like qualitative discussion when we're coming back with racial equity stuff. But I think formally we can absolutely do a 6-month review.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hanalea, can you put that back up again? I want to take a picture of that and just kind of really sit back and go over it. And then if I have any questions, I'll call you.
Absolutely.
Sharita, I got your face in it.
My face.
And I will also follow up, Sharita, with those questions you had about transition age youth, because I think they're important ones. So I'll definitely follow up with an email about just that piece of things.
Thank you. All right, that was great. So we have 2 more items on our agenda in about 20 minutes. The first item on the agenda was so on Friday, I got a request from the National Healthcare, a targeted request from the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council for the state of North Carolina. There is a piece of legislation that is pending in North Carolina regarding increasing access to medication-assisted treatment. So this is the buprenorphine program, kind of similar to methadone for people who suffer from opioid addiction. I'm gonna try to share. And the request was asking, I don't see it. The request is essentially asking for providers to sign on to a letter that was that's been drafted already in support that would go to Senators Burr and Tom Tillis, asking them to support this the bill. It's the Mainstreaming Addiction Treatment Act, House in the House 1384 is the number / S dot 445. And I wanted to share the letter with you, but it is not popping up on my screen, but I have it open. Let me see if I can find it.
Sharita, that bill passed, right? Because I know
It has not passed. The deadline for this letter, the deadline for the sign-ons is June the 17th.
Okay, is that the one for the needles, right?
No, it's the one for buprenorphine program. So it's the medication that prevents overdoses. We've had some significant increases in the state that the letter was actually talking about, that I thought was important to share. But for some reason, let me see, I might have to download it, y'all. That might be why you guys can't see it now. Let me go back and see if I can. There it is.
And that would be great for a lot of the homeless people that
So this is essentially, in essence, the letter. I did take this letter when I got the request, and I sent it to, I think I sent it to Russ. I definitely sent it to Lincoln Community Health Center. We have a medication assisted treatment buprenorphine program, but we have very few providers in the state of North Carolina who are even prescribers. This would increase access, especially in our rural communities. And just a little bit of information was that in North Carolina is losing children and parents to drug overdoses at an alarming rate. During the COVID-19 pandemic, overdose deaths in North Carolina have increased by 64%, from 2,457 annual deaths in February 2020 to 4,023 annual deaths in December 2021. The loss of life far outpaces the national rise in the overdose deaths. So our national overdose death number is at 45%, and we are significantly higher than the national average. As I said, they wanted specifically to see if we had any homeless service providers who were concerned about this that would be willing to sign on to the letter. It's actually a link where the agencies that agree to sign on, you would just click on that link and you would add your name to the list, and then your name or your entity would pop up at the end of this letter, and it will be forwarded after June the 17th. Colin and I thought this might be something that Homeless Services Advisory Committee as a whole could take part in. As far as signing on to this letter, again, I've sent it to some of our homeless housing providers, specifically our street outreach provider. I think I sent it to Open Table as well, and as well as Lincoln and Alliance. So, which Alliance may be all over it, but we wanted to talk about it today as potentially a recommendation for our committee, if you guys feel inclined to do so, to escalate up to HSAC to get a decision on whether HSAC as a body would like to sign on to the letter. So it's open for discussion now.
I have a, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'll definitely support this. This is one of the things that our community paramedic program has actually been looking at. We do follow up on post overdose for opioids as part of our program. And one of the things that we're hoping to be able to do is actually administer buprenorphine in the field to get people started on treatment while we're getting them connected to an established opioid-based office treatment program. And so we could definitely support this.
I know some of us may be limited in what we can sign on to, but like Commissioner Carter, is this something that you feel like you want to share with the other county commissioners as something that they can consider as well? Janine, same thing. I know that, and I don't know what your constraints are, but I just wanted to bring it to the body as a way that we can actively participate in supporting those that we serve as it relates to our opioid epidemic and the crisis that we see happening in North Carolina. And I can get you guys a copy of the email in its totality with the link at the bottom as well.
That'd be great. If you do that, I will definitely share it with my fellow commissioners. And if there's enough time, we could discuss it, publicly, or just go ahead and sign on, either one. But I feel certain that we would definitely, this is something we would support.
Angel, I see your hand is up.
Yes, so I was at the Senate thing last week before last one, and then when they pass the thing for the needle exchange, I had left out early, and I really didn't didn't get the information on it. Is anybody aware of if that was passed? I've been trying to see it on the TV, but unfortunately, God has ate my remote. So
I'm not aware. If I find the information, I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
No problem. So just kind of want to get a consensus from the group as to whether we want to send this on to HSAC as something for HSAC to consider at this time or not. I think Helen is in support of it, and I hear that Commissioner Carter is going to share it with our county commissioners. I got a yes from Heidi Carter.
Do you need a motion for this?
Colin, do I need a motion, or can we just say yes, we're going to escalate it because we're not necessarily making a final decision?
A motion to recommend that the HSAC sign on to this letter?
Yes.
Well,
Okay, I motion that.
I think we would.
Go ahead,
I think we would sort of say yes. We'd like to recommend it. Make a motion that we take it to the HSAC for approval. Although HSAC is meeting after I think this letter is due. But we
I think we talked about sending it out to HSAC before then. I think that's what we talked about.
Well, we
Like
can send it out we can send it out to the full. We can send the letter out to the full COC.
Okay.
And let individual organizations sign onto it before the 17th.
Okay.
And HSAC would be signing after the 17th.
Really? Yeah, that's right.
So the HSAC could still sign a letter and, mail it. It just may not do anything. That's why I was suggesting is send out the information, that the Policy and Planning Committee is recommending that agencies who are interested in signing on, due to when this letter is due to the appropriate folks. It's not the time for us to get it to HSAC for review, but Policy and Planning is recommending that any agency who is working with people who are dealing with substance abuse and opioids would and are so inclined and able to do so, please sign.
I forgot about that part. As far as this being only good until the 17th, the letter to sign on, because I will assume that the link on here will deactivate after the 17th. You won't be able to sign on to this form later, but that doesn't stop you from being able to send a letter of support later on. So it sounds like we need to make a motion to send it out to our full COC and encourage willing organizations to sign on if they are so inclined.
So moved.
I second.
I think that was Colleen and Angel.
A
Yes.
second.
Okay. Okay, all those in favor put yes in the box. Noes have the same right as well as people who have to abstain.
If you could put me down, I don't have the chat open.
No problem,
Yes.
Shay. We got you.
Thank you.
And that motion carries. Thank you guys so much. And then the last thing we have on our agenda, and we have like 9 minutes, is some information Angel wanted to share with us about a person at CDI. I don't know how else to say it without telling the Angel, so I'm gonna let you have the floor.
Thank you. So I can't open screen, but anyone that's affiliated, well, Russ, I know you guys over there for Housing for New Hope know Mr. Willie from when you all were over there helping out a couple years ago. But anyone over there at Caroline Duke and CDI, Mr. Willie was the maintenance guy over there, drove a white truck, and he did an outstanding job there, well beyond the call of duty. And on Friday, I had went pass out some food and noticed there was an ambulance and stuff there. And unfortunately, Mr. Willie had passed in his room. So he died Friday. I just want to let you guys know, and anybody that knows him knows this.
Do you know if there's gonna be anything done for him? Do you know any details?
I haven't been back over there. I'll go by there and ask Vic, the manager, and see what they are, because I had his daughter's number. I couldn't find it to find out anything. And of course, the officers and anything, they couldn't get out any information. So I just wanted to share that with anybody, with everyone. You know, anybody knows anything that goes on up at CDI, Mr. Willie was dead on. You know, I used to call him Pops. You know, Pops is not here, and may rest in peace.
Such a tragic loss. Thanks for letting us know.
Yeah.
And just a little side note, Mr. Willie was, when we first went to CDI from Marriott, and there were 20 rooms, there were no food options. We didn't have a catering service. UMD wasn't set up to run it yet. Mr. Willie would run around and went to McDonald's, Bojangles, went to a couple different places to bring food to all the residents 3 times a day for some period of time while we were in various transition points. So he was a above and beyond guy who did a lot to help.
Yeah,
make
he
this
had a
work.
heart attack earlier this year and was hospitalized. He had been sick for a while. Plus, he worked at another facility in Raleigh, so he was all over the place, and he helped a lot with Reinvestment Partners when they were reconstruction over there on the other side. He's well known and well liked, and just to see the residents out there after they learned of the death of him, you know, you could see he was a well-loved man and well needed there. So CDI is going to be lost without him. Yeah, it may even shut down. I wouldn't be surprised if it shuts down after this. So then on top of homelessness, we'll have homelessness over there. So he really kept that place, tried to clean it up and really do what he could over there. And I'm sorry.
May he rest in peace. He sounds like an awesome man. Yeah. I'm sorry to like end on that note, but we have some people doing some phenomenal things, and you know, I wish we could give people their flowers before we have moments like this, but that sounds like he was truly an asset to the community and to the residents that were there. Colin, I don't know if you knew before Angel shared this information. Do you know if there's any kind of support or counseling support or anything for any of the tenants over there that are struggling with this? Do you know?
I don't know. I'll check with Sheldon and Sally. I think Sally's on the call. She was.
It's definitely going to be needed, Colin, over there.
Yeah, and I did reach out to Mr. Patel. So we'll see what's going on. I'll keep you posted if I hear things.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. So we have like 4 minutes, but I think Sally had a question.
Oh,
Sally?
I just wondered if y'all had already approved the minutes that from May.
We have.
And did you discuss, there was just a comment about the providers of rapid rehousing that I wondered about, but maybe it came up.
It did not.
It said, in the notes, it said there are 2 providers of rapid rehousing. Most of the work is falling on Housing for New Hope. UMD Fresh Start can't take anyone but their own clients due to other funding issues and implementation. And I just wanted to note that we're a provider of rapid rehousing, and I didn't really understand about Fresh Start. They're taking clients.
Yeah, Sally, I think thanks for highlighting that. I hadn't looked at that, but that's actually not what I said about Fresh Start either. What I had said was that they could only take chronically homeless clients and those with documentation, so that there was less of a mix for them.
So can we make that after we've approved the minutes, can we go back and make that correction? Colin?
I think if you need to make a correction, you can open it back up to make a correction.
All right, well, let's reopen the minutes. And Sally, can you? Oh goodness, I don't have it up anymore.
Well, I guess the correction is there are, at least 3 providers of rapid rehousing.
Okay.
Rehousing program, albeit a small one.
And
So we
Shirley,
just need to
I
make
think
a
we should also
change.
correct that we didn't say that Fresh Start could only take their own clients, but that they could only take documented chronic clients.
Okay.
Sharita, I can also, if you want, share the information I said I'd look into about the families on the waiting list. If you want, I was able to look into it while y'all were talking.
So let me just make sure I get this correct. We need to make a correction in the minutes regarding how many rapid rehousing providers we have from 2 to 3. And we need to make the correction that Fresh Start can only take chronically homeless clients. Is that correct?
Well, there's actually more than 3 rapid rehousing providers. Currently there's 4.
Are you referring to DCRC?
That's correct.
Okay, so 4, it needs to be changed from 3 to 4. And then Fresh Start can only take chronically homeless folks. Do we need to revote, Colin, with these changes?
Yes, you'll need to revote for the amended minutes.
So I would entertain a motion to amend the minutes with the corrections that were noted by Sally and Hanalea to change the rapid rehousing total number of providers to 4 and to make correction to the Fresh Start program only being able to take chronically homeless persons into their program. Who voted it? Who passed? Who voted before?
He made the original motion, I believe. I'm not positive.
Ebony, are you still here?
I think she had to step away earlier.
Okay. Anybody want to give me a new motion?
I will
amend the minutes.
I will give you a new motion.
I'll second it.
So I have a motion by Helen, seconded by Levette. Is that correct? Was that Levette that said that?
It wasn't me, but I mean, I could.
It was
I'm not.
Oh, it was Shay. I'm sorry, I don't have that
Yes,
on the screen
ma'am.
right now. Okay, and it's
I'm
seconded
sorry.
by
I
Shay.
had to dial in today.
I
Yeah.
know, it's okay. It's okay. It's me not having the screen up. All those in favor, you can place your yes in the chat box, your no in the chat box, abstain if you need to, for the amendment of the minutes. Okay, motion carries. It is 12:01. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn.
All right. So that was Helen, and that was seconded by Helen, and the motion was by Angel, right?
Yes.
All righty. It was indeed a pleasure to meet with you guys today and get some very important work done. Analea, was I supposed to let you say something?
Y'all had wanted me to look at the families list and see if there was any kind of
I'm sorry.
about what was causing the families to become homeless.
Uh-huh.
So I looked at it, and so 14% of those on the list were on the list before our last meeting. So there's some kind of retention stuff. And then 18% were recently evicted or were in the process of being evicted and then became unsheltered over the last month. 14% were evicted a while back and have been homeless for a while or couch surfing for a while and then became homeless, something like that. 11% are fleeing intimate partner violence, and 18% were kicked out by a friend or family member.
Gotcha. So that 18% is some of our group.
Yeah, it's about 5 families that were evicted in the past month or so. Kind of.
Gotcha.
Hanalea, what was the last percentage?
It was 18% were kicked out by a friend or family member.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Okay. We had already did the motion to adjourn. Thank you for this information, Hanalea.
Sure.
We will not have a meeting in July. Our next meeting will be in August. You guys enjoy your month off, and we will resume on the second Monday in August. Take care.
Be blessed all.
You too. Thank you.